All right, Izhar, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for being my kind host overseas this evening.
Of course, 12,000 kilometers not keeping us apart even in terms of Corona.
Absolutely. How have you been
Okay,
doing?
so parliament member and former VC and a CEO and entrepreneur and social entrepreneur and all around incredible leader, one of the best that I know. It's not going to do justice if we even start to talk a bit about what you did. Can you share a little bit about some of the things that you've done over the past several dozen years and some of the things that excite you?
Oh well, I started my career as an electronics engineer and then moved on into all kind of capacities. I think that my most exciting times were spent as an entrepreneur. I enjoyed very much taking ideas into product, into customers' hands, into building a business around them, which I did a number of times. Two of them were with venture-backed companies that I had the privilege of running. Both of them realized a successful exit for investors, but that was not the main issue. The main point was really seeing your product in the hands of customers and positively influencing people around the world, which was a lot of excitement, a lot of fun, and self-rewarding in terms of satisfaction, pride, all those things that I guess motivate us as individuals. And so I did that, and then I joined a venture capital firm in the US called Canaan Partners. I was one of a team of 10 people most times, where we invested in companies mostly in the US, but also in Israel and in India. And that was exciting as well, this time taking a backseat as a board member, as an investor, hopefully sometimes as a value-add investor. I had a lot of fun, and this was also rewarding in the sense of having the chance of working with very talented, bright people around the world on bringing their ideas into markets, into influencing positively people around the world, which is, again, a lot of fun, a lot of satisfaction. And, it was also an educating journey, just because you meet with so many bright people with so many great ideas, and you only can join some of them on their journey. But that was very exciting as well. So, I did all kind of interesting things. I guess the last year plus, we can speak about as well if you want.
So okay, so interesting things. I think that's putting it a little bit mildly, and we'll get to that. But as of last year, you're a Knesset member, and you're now serving the public, serving Israel, and you're influencing in ways that are very different from the way an entrepreneur or a venture capitalist can. And it sounds like a pretty interesting transition, moving from high tech, very agile, move fast and break things, very capitalistic, to all of a sudden serving the public and bringing the social good in mind. So why at age 55 are you now standing in the Knesset and fighting for the good of the Israeli citizens?
Wow. One day when I have the time to sit down and write my memories, I'll have to go back to this specific question and try to answer it properly. At this time, I can only offer thoughts, because this is an ongoing process. I'm more than a year into this. It kind of happened all of a sudden, although I had been, so to speak, in public service for quite some time, as a volunteer. Yes, a venture capitalist, but that aside, as a volunteer, I ran a non-for-profit organization that dealt with, and still is dealing now without me, but dealt with youth around the country here in Israel, coming from challenging social, economic backgrounds. So those young adults were under the great support and care of our volunteers around the country. So I did that for more than 10 years. Very hard as a volunteer on integrating various people into the Israeli high tech, coming from.
You worked with the Haredis as well, right?
Say that again.
You worked with the Haredis as well, quite a bit.
Right. So yeah. So my point was trying to integrate people who come from communities right. Which are not necessarily integrated properly into the Israeli high tech. That way, integrating those people into the high-tech bubble served two main causes. One of them is just giving them equal opportunities and providing them with the appropriate platform to go about their desires and also improving their economics. But also, there was also a bigger cause, which was this is important for the Israeli society. You know, bringing people together right. from different communities, different backgrounds is something that we are missing badly over here. So I did that, and then at a certain point in juncture, I came across this opportunity of joining the political life, which was a very tough decision, leaving all those exciting, interesting, and fun lifestyles and just way of going about life. That was a lot of fun and very rewarding personally, and also the kind of life I think I would be happy to go back one day 20-30 years from now. So I had to leave all of this behind me and join the political arena. But I think that I did this because I understood that what I did as a volunteer can scale up in a significant way if I am willing to take the responsibility and willing to take upon the challenge and turn my life completely upside down from a private entrepreneur and venture capitalist becoming a public figure. That's a hell of a change. I did this and here I am.
I mean, so you took a really non-traditional approach, right? I mean, a lot of politicians, they start in politics from a very, very junior position, and then their dream is to even hopefully one day become close to being a Knesset member. And you really jumped into the ship of some really, really amazing people, and over a year fought really for democracy as the main stance more than anything. And now you're talking about the high-tech technology within government. Now, those two things don't make sense to me. I mean, when you think of government, at least, I guess up until my generation, a bit beyond, you think of slow-moving, you think of bureaucracy, you think of it's all about the budget for this and budget for that, and now you're coming in and saying, let's do it high-tech. What does that mean? Can governments be agile? Can governments pivot when they need to? Can they take risks?
Wow. You nailed this, Michael, right to the point. So, it is a huge challenge. Governments are slow, very bureaucratic, huge operations, in many cases unnecessarily big, and with so many processes that kind of go against innovation, against agile approaches to anything. And then you go into this and say, I'm going to introduce a change. So, yes, it is a huge challenge, but this is part of the transformation any nation with emphasis on democratic nations, they have to go through. So, technology has taken the world through a significant breakthrough, and we have also seen a leap forward of changing the way we run our lives personally, on the business side, on the community side, everywhere around us. Governments are still way behind and very slow to respond, but governments who want to survive have to go through that transition. Your generation will not be willing to accept governments that slow down your development, your personal development, your desires, your willingness to do stuff quickly and efficiently. It's a way of life, right? So here's a huge challenge. I think that I am in a good position to realize that the need is there, that it is a critical need, and we have to start that transition. So, I think that other people already started this transition, not only in Israel, but in other democracies like in the US and elsewhere. But there's a lot to be done. And I think that we are here in Israel in a good position to try to push things forward because we are a startup nation, because there are so many technologies, breakthrough technologies that are being developed here, and because we are a small country overall. The positive noise, the positive technology and innovation noise has gone across just the high-tech community. So many people around the country somehow understand the notion of innovation, and they also grew to demand better from the government just because they see things managed differently elsewhere. And so this is some sort of a turning point where people around the country realize that a change is needed, a change is possible, and we, the politicians, have the duty of introducing those changes. So let me give you a number of examples. We want to provide a much better, efficient service to the public. Most of the service where the government faces the public in Israel, and by the way, elsewhere as well, still requires many face-to-face interactions, many paper-based interactions, and sort of old world ways of running your business. So, my vision is hopefully a number of years from now, by law, all Israeli government offices and authorities will be required to have an electronic interface with anybody who requires. So, I have my parents, they're 80 plus years old. They want to interface person to person, and that's totally fine. But your generation, you will probably find it hard to believe that you need to go somewhere, you need to file a paper, you need to interface with a clerk. It's really unacceptable, and there's no reason for that. So we have to go through that transition. I should say that a number of Israeli offices, Israeli governmental offices, have started to go through that transition, but still there is a long way to go. Luckily, again, we're a startup nation. There are so many technologies, so many products that have been developed over here to improve the efficiency of processes, to provide better service to customers, to manage all kind of processes in a much better way. So all of this, interesting enough, is being sold outside of Israel just because Israeli entrepreneurs do not want to deal with the government. Rightfully so. I was an entrepreneur. I have my scars of trying to sell to the Israeli government, so I know what it takes. But if you just improve that facet of the government, you suddenly see the Israeli municipalities taking advantage of so many smart cities technologies that have been developed in Israel but are sold exclusively elsewhere, out of the country. You see so many technologies that can improve the efficiency, the productivity, the security of government agencies sold elsewhere that can be integrated into our government over here. So that's an example, and I've just touched upon the kind of the surface. This is the trivial transition, going paperless, going electronically, and so on. But there's so many other layers that one could think about, and we have so many good ideas that I can spend the next 20 years on integrating all kinds of interesting ideas. That would be a lot of fun.
Venture capitalist, you're sitting, and I have the privilege now of experiencing a little taste of it here in Silicon Valley, and it's you're sitting there and you're trying to think of a business proposition, an opportunity to change consumer behavior, to improve the lives of many, and then you're sitting on your side of the table as the venture capitalist and trying to think, is this viable? Can I grow this into a scalable business that will actually bring value to people? I can't help but make the comparison that sitting in the position that you are now, you're seeing all these propositions all the time, Do you find yourself ever putting on this venture capitalist hat and trying to assess whether, if this was a startup that came and proposed, would I believe this entrepreneur, would I believe this model that they're suggesting?
Oh, absolutely. Let me give you an example, Michael. It's an interesting analogy. Here's something I learned. Every parliament member is actually some sort of a P&L unit. So really, here in Israel, we have 120 parliament members, each of whom makes decisions as to what to focus on and what to invest their time in. And there are many opportunities to advance all kind of laws, all kind of public services, and one has to focus. One has to decide what is their specific advantage, what are their desires, and what is that you really want to promote. Every day as a public servant, I get approached by many people who rightfully so have all kind of interesting ideas, all kind of desires, or all kind of problems. And you have to make that decision. You have to make that decision of, I want to focus on certain areas. I'm going to specialize in those areas. I want to provide service to certain constituents. And by doing this, by the way, I realize that I give up others. So it's not an easy decision, pretty much the same way venture capitalists work.
Right.
As a VC partner, I would see about 1,000 opportunities every year. Obviously, as you know, I would have not been able to deal with even 1% of them. And
Right.
if I did 2 to 3 deals a year, I would feel pretty good about it.
Right.
Same here, just to give you a sense, the previous full-term Knesset that worked in Israel was the 20th Knesset. It worked for about 4 years, and it was able to put together about 400 plus laws, in Israel, but the number of law proposals that were submitted were about 6,000 law proposals as from the get-go. So here's your ratio. If you think about this, about 6,000 law proposals that were filtered in, not by VCs, but by Knesset members. So each of those Knesset members probably looked at at least 3 to 5 times that number. Then they decided to narrow down to about 6,000 law proposals. And 4 years later, you see that about 400, or say, like 7-8% of them were really transacted. So this is like taking the VC approach and understanding it, and then kind of mapping it to what the process looks like in my life today. And frankly, my life as a VC is helpful here. I learned to prioritize, to understand where my added value stands, and to force myself to focus while realizing that I may be giving up other opportunities as well.
And you probably can't say it yourself, but honestly, it probably is from the VC perspective. You also know sometimes to cut the bullshit and to get to the point and know some of the things that go behind what's actually behind the PowerPoint presentation, and I'm sure that brings a lot of value as well.
But let me give you, I can give you an interesting example of how all this combines, if you want.
Yeah, of course.
So, these are coronavirus times, I should say. And one of the things one of the big challenges we are facing as the parliament here in Israel is the significant, realistic fear that sometime over the next few days or few weeks, we may find many of us parliament members out of the Knesset, out of the parliament, either being instructed to stay home because we were close to somebody who was infected, or some of us may be infected themselves. So here's the challenge. The Israeli parliament, by a very significant law, we call them foundation laws. This is like the constitution translated into Israeli terms. We do not have a constitution here, but we have basic laws that kind of control the way we govern our democracy. One of these laws dictates that any discussion and voting must take in person in the Knesset. If you're not in the Knesset, you're not allowed to vote. You're not allowed to be part of the discussion. Wow. And interesting enough, throughout the 72 years of the Israeli parliament, there was never a session that was,
exempt from
prevented from being handled because of anything. So, sometimes there is there used to be emergency cases. We were attacked here and there, so you stop for 24 hours, but you continue the discussion and the voting process. So the democracy continues to run. But nobody ever thought that you may find a situation where people cannot go in person to do this. And by the way, we have provisions of substituting the Knesset building into some other building. There are all kinds of backup buildings. So gathering is possible, but the notion of doing this electronically was never considered, not for technology reasons, but just for, you could call this basic democracy.
Yeah.
You want to see the person in person. So I used my experience and submitted an urgent law proposal to the Knesset, where we are kind of running against time. It takes time to process law. Sometimes it takes 2 to 3 years. Sometimes it takes a few months. It rarely takes a few days, but we are running against time. And so the clock is ticking. We submitted the law proposal this week, and we hope to be able to bring it up to discussion on Monday next week, which is a record-breaking pace. And that law will allow for a limited amount of time and for very specific cases, which are people that have to be isolated by the orders of the Ministry of Health, or they have been infected, but they will be allowed to log in electronically, and they will be allowed to discuss and to vote, which is a very significant precedence. We have to go through all the motions. We sat with top lawyers here in Israel, constitutional lawyers and others, and we have come up with the right formula that kind of satisfies everybody. And now we are running against time. The real fear is that we will not have enough people to vote on submitting and approaching and approving this law before people are being isolated. So here's a combination of everything. You have the BC guy, the technology guy, and the parliament member who are trying to put all of this together.
Very, very fascinating. Wow. Well, best of luck. I mean, that's just inspiring to hear from my end. Izhar, you have to go back to running the country, but 3 words that describe you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dreamer, optimistic, passionate.
I love it. Izhar, thank you so much. Loved having you.
Good luck, my kid.
Take
good care of yourself, please.
Take care. Stay healthy. Bye-bye.
Bye.